Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of Real Talk with Tola. Hope you guys are doing good. Hope your week has been fantastic. My week was pretty good. I went back to the office. It was a lot of effort. It was a lot of effort having to, get dressed, wear makeup at 6 a.m., catch bus, climb off bus, wear high heels, go upstairs. Good, but it was really actually quite nice to see people again in person. So I hope you guys had a great week. That was my little recap. So as some of you guys may know, if this is your first time joining me, welcome to the channel. Here at Real Talk with here at Real Talk with Tola, we have very candid and open and honest conversations about love, marriage, faith, finances, money, life. Basically, we're here to talk about life. And lately, I've been doing this. I started a series last week actually on looking at the marriages in the Bible and the dynamics between the two couples because, I was sort of questioning whether or not love is, the Bible really tells us that love is this great sweeping healing power, and looking at the examples basically in the marriage where relationships are not always smooth sailing, and what can we learn from these couples, what their trials and their temptations, and how we could sort of adapt that to the issues that we're sort of facing in the world today. So this is not just for marriage, whatever stage you are on the relationship spectrum, whether you're starting to date, whether you're engaged, whether you're married, whether you're divorced, whether you're a widow. There's so many things that we can learn, and I hope that this channel will be a great resource for you for your relationships as you navigate it. So let's get right into part 2, where we start talking about Abraham and Sarah. So last week we really focused on the beauty of Sarah and just their dynamic as a couple, the power of being submissive and vulnerable in a relationship, and I think that theme sort of continues into this week. We'll be going to chapters, look at the later chapters. So our key chapters that we're going to be looking at from today for this session is looking at chapter 15. So I love chapter 15 because a lot has happened with Abraham and his lovely wife. But in chapter 15, Abraham gets visited by God. So God comes to Abraham and says, and after all these things, the word of the Lord came to Abraham in a vision. Fear not, Abraham, I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great. But Abraham said, O God, what will you give me, for I continue to be childless? And the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. And Abraham said, behold, you have given me no offspring, and a member of my household will be my heir. So I really, really love this interaction between God and Abraham, because here's God trying to promise him all these nice things, I'm going to be your shield, I'm going to be like your reward. And Abraham just point blank says, yeah, but what's the point though? I don't have a child. And I just loved how vulnerable Abraham was able to be with God and say, yeah, but you're promising me all these things, but this one thing that I need, I'm not seeing it. So let's hear what God says. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him. This man shall not, speaking of Eliezer, this man shall not be your heir. Your very own son shall be your heir. And then he brought him outside and said, look towards the heaven, the number of the stars, if you're able to number them. And then he said, so shall be your offsprings. And later on, Abraham and God sign a treaty where he sacrifices some animals, and they sort of enter into a covenant, which basically says that if whoever breaks this covenant is cursed. And God took that place, and I just found that so amazing, such a beautiful session that he's just had with God in the previous chapter. Okay, let's go to chapter 16 to see what happens. So chapter 16 opens up like this. Now Sarah, Abraham's wife, had borne him no children. So again, he's just had a conversation with God about this lack of children, and the first sentence we get is that they ain't got no children. Okay, and she had a female Egyptian servant whose name was Hagar, however you pronounce her name. And Sarah said to Abraham, behold, now the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. So go in to my servant. It may be that I may obtain children by her. And Abraham listened to the voice of Sarah. Now, when I read this, I said, I felt really sad for Abraham and for Sarah, because Abraham had just had an encounter with God. God just came and spoke to him just in the previous chapter. This is what I want you to do. This is what I'm going to do with you. And his wife has come with a problem. His wife has just come and broken down and said, you know what? This is a problem that we're having. I have a solution for us. I want you to have a child. I can't give you a child, but we can make this work by having somebody else, give us a child. And Abraham listened to Sarah. And that really, really made me sad. I just found that so fascinating, that the way the scripture says it is that he listened to Sarah's voice. But let's continue. So after Abraham had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Abraham's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, her servant, and gave her to her husband as a wife. So not only Sarah was doing too much, not only as like a side piece. He said, take her as a wife. And he went into Hagar, so he did the deed, he had sex with her, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, so when Hagar saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. And I love this word. Let's look at what the definition of contempt means. Contempt means the feeling that a person or a thing is worthless or beneath consideration, or disregard for something that should be considered. Oh, this is so beautiful, but really, really sad as well. So Hagar starts to look at Sarah with contempt, and I can only imagine like the pain that would have caused for Sarah, because, and just the pride that Hagar would have had, like, you couldn't give him a child, but I could. Like, I could also understand from Hagar's perspective why her ego would have been so inflated, because she's probably been with Sarah. She's probably heard the stories of how hard they've tried, how long they've been waiting, but there she was, able to conceive, able to give Abraham something that I'm sure she knows that Abraham desperately wanted as well. Let's continue to read. And Sarah said to Abraham, Sarah said, verse 5, Sarah said, "May the wrong done to me but be on you. I gave my servants to your embrace. I gave my servants to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May the Lord judge between you and me." And when I read it, I say, Sarah, wow, okay, because Tamaranti, if it's when I switch to Yoruba, I'm saying, Sarah, you're right there, because just a few chapters before, this was your idea. Like, this was, what did she think was gonna happen? What did Sarah think was going to happen? You are the one that brought solution, and the solution to the problem that you brought worked. Why is God judging? Why is God judging between you two? You made this mess. Like, don't lie. But let's keep reading, shall, before I give my verdict, before Tola judges. But the Lord, may the Lord judge between you and me. But Abraham said to Sarah, "Behold, your servant is in your power. Do to her as you please." And again, we got to give Abraham points. We have to give Abraham points. And then it says Sarah dealt harshly with Hagar, and Hagar had to flee. And this so much, just in 6 verses, so much happens. And what it really made me think about, there's so many themes in here that we can sort of just discuss. I can only maybe imagine, again, I blamed Abraham initially, because number one, God just spoke to you. You literally just had Abraham. So literally, why I can say that they must have had like a season of miscommunication in their marriage is that I could not understand why Abraham didn't just tell Sarah that, yeah, but I just got a vision from God. Like, or even when he was doing all the sacrifices, that she wasn't there, or that she didn't even know. I couldn't understand that. Like, Abraham, you just had a revelation from God Almighty, and this woman said, but you chose to listen to your voice. And I don't know, but I guess this is submission. Again, where Abraham, am I giving him too much credit? I feel like, I don't want to say it, I feel like I'm giving him too much credit, but I could judge him. But him choosing, when she goes, well, she's looking at me with contempt now, choosing that to say, well, this was your choice, this was your decision, go ahead and do whatever you want to do, whatever you think is best. I think, again, Abraham submits a lot, really deeply, to Sarah and his wife, which I find absolutely beautiful as well. That, hey, yeah, but I just can't, I guess in this season, they're really, really just hurting each other. she sends Hagar away, and then Hagar has her own encounters with God, and she's encouraged to go back and live with Sarah and not be disrespectful to her, and that she will bear a son, and there's a promise over Ishmael, and Ishmael is born. Let's continue. So chapter 18 is the famous chapter where we get the visitations. This is where and the key verses here is, let's go to verse 9. So they said to him, "Where is Sarah your wife?" And he said, "She is in the tent." The Lord said, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and your wife Sarah shall have a son." And Sarah was listening at the door behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in age. The way of the woman ceased to be with Sarah. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "After I am worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure?" Like, she laughed. She just could not believe this. It was like utter disbelief. And then, the Lord said, "Why did you laugh? Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? By the appointed time, I will return to you about this time next year, and Sarah shall have a son." She denies it. Let's go to chapter 21. Then the Lord visited Sarah as he had said. So the Lord visited Sarah, and the Lord did to Sarah as he had promised. So again, I just love this this chapter. It says the Lord visited. So it just made me just realize that children are by the visitation of the Lord. And I just pray for anyone that is trusting God for the fruit of the womb. I pray that the Lord will visit you as well. And Sarah conceived, and she bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the time of which God had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore to him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded. And at this age, Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born. And Sarah said, "God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh over me." And she said, "Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age." And you could just hear the pride in Sarah's voice, the relief in Sarah's voice that she was finally able to do something. Like, who would have believed this? But I finally done it. Like, as a woman, like, I could literally cry for Sarah in that sense that, what, this is, God has made her laugh. God has made special laughter for her. And whoever hears this will laugh over me. So, okay, this is where I know Sarah is mercy. Chapter 21, verse 8. And the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne with Abraham, laughing. Hey. So she said to Abraham, "Cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of this slave woman shall not be here with my son Isaac." And I just thought, like, you were so happy, like you finally got what you wanted, and like Hagar's son Ishmael's laughter was such a trigger for her that she had to just get rid of him. Like, just sad. And it says there, and verse 11 said, "And this thing was very displeasing to Abraham on account of his son." So this hurt Abraham so much. But God said to Abraham, "Be not displeased because of the boy, because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you, for through Isaac shall your offsprings be named." And I just thought, man, like, how painful that would have been for Abraham as well, that he had to get rid of his own child. Even like, that's painful. Like, this is such a sad episode. It really was painful to see that she just couldn't handle, I guess, a reminder of his infidelity. Like, that was just what it stood at. It was a reminder of this infidelity, or a reminder of, I guess, her own failing, and a reminder of her own impatience as well. Like, I can understand from Sarah's perspective that this would have just been like seeing them going around happy, or it was a reminder of her past mistakes and a future, I guess, unbalance with her own child. So that was quite interesting. So Abraham listened to this. He sends his mistress and child away. So yeah, and so towards the end of their relationship, chapter 23 says Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah, and she died at Kiryat Araba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. And I just love that the Bible tells us about the end of their relationship, that, you know, he was, it was, like he actually wept. He wasn't like, whoa, let me go back and get Hagar. Further down as well, I think Abraham decides to be buried where she is. But yeah, just in the second part of the love story of these two people, what it really made me think about was just the fact that sometimes as couples, or when we get into a relationship, we have quite, you know, high expectations, you know, especially with childbirth, and coming from like a cultural background, like, you know, a Nigerian background. Like, childbirth is like, I think from the first year they are looking at your womb, like, to see any signs of children. And for these people to be married for so long and to have 60, 40, not 20 years, not 40 years, like 60 plus years of just waiting, we don't know when they got together, but such a long time of waiting before they could actually have children is such a pain. Like, I could really empathize with them. And in these instances, I guess the lesson for me, and what I kind of glean from these chapters, is that, you know, sometimes, like, number one, I think opposites attract, in the sense that Abraham and Sarah were very much opposites in their relationship with God, or we're on different spectrums of faith in their relationship with God. And sometimes, you know, I think there's a misconception that, you know, just because both of you, maybe as a couple, you both go to church, or, you know, you both, are Bible believing, that you have the same level of faith. And the reality is that each person has their own individual understanding of God. And there is a lot of work that we don't really talk about in merging those two ideals together. Even if, I guess the Bible tells us, you know, don't be unequally yoked with an unbeliever. We don't necessarily talk about the realities of being yoked with somebody that, like, just because you guys both, you could even both grow up in the same environment, go to the same church, be hearing the same thing, but the level of faith that both of you share as a couple is quite different. And we can see that clearly with Abraham, when, number one, Abraham had heard from God. He had, you know, he had listened. God had even physically showed him a physical sign, but he number one, didn't communicate that with Sarah, or maybe even Sarah knew, but she wasn't on that level. So there is sometimes a mismatch. And another example, they were both visited by the three men. Abraham believed Sarah was still there with her doubt, or maybe Sarah was definitely more of a pessimist in this situation, where you just have, like, it's not really talked about that sometimes when it comes to faith, those two things don't always match. And it's always something that couples actually have to really work on. And sometimes if you're the person with more faith, there's a lot of work and support that you have to do to get that person on that level of faith with you. Or would you let that bring down your level of faith? I think the mistake that Abraham made here, to me, if I'm judging him, is just listening, I guess, to the voice of Sarah. But I don't think that's fair enough, because who else was he gonna listen to? Like, maybe we just got a sentence. She could have been like, yeah, but can you do this? But, like, you know, sitting down together, they could have planned, they could have thought of many ways, devised many schemes just to give this thing. And for me, I could also have, being petty, I could have, in Sarah's position, I could have been doing that. Like, I don't know, sometimes as ladies, we say one thing when we don't really mean it. Like, you know, we spew out things that we don't mean, hoping that we'll get a different reaction from our spouses or the people that we love. That if I say this, maybe because I watch a lot of Korean dramas, you know, I would say something bad and I want you to be like, no, but I love you, I'd never do that. Maybe that's what Sarah was hoping for, that Abraham would have been like, are you all right? Are you? But instead he said yes. And, you know, and for her to maybe even be thinking, oh, well, maybe from this we could know that, you know, I'm not the problem, that maybe you're the problem. And then buzz, quack, breaking news, Hagar gets pregnant. So in this situation, it's so sad, isn't it? Like, in this situation, I'm just like, oh, sometimes, yeah, in marriage we can be mismatched. We can have seasons of mismatched priorities or mismatched communication, and seasons of desperation as well. And in that desperation, we're looking for a way out that may not always have our best interest, or may not always have God's interest for us. We may think that we're solving a problem, but it's not necessarily the best thing, as we saw, because it just brought them so much pain. Like that, even after she had had the child and she had weaned her son, because somebody else's child laughed, she couldn't handle that reminder of her failure, that was constantly in her face, that she had to be like, you know what, get rid of your child, I don't want to see them, I'm done with them. So that was actually quite painful for me to sort of read. It hurts. And then on the other hand as well, it made me really think about the concept of whose voice do we actually listen to, because again, Abraham had heard the voice of God, but here he's choosing to listen to the voice of his wife. And there was an example that I was listening to, like, for example, if like your spouse is called by God, to go into ministry, or go, and you don't listen to that call, what are you supposed to do? And a lot of the conversations that I've had with people in my life has always been like, okay, no, you should always, like, there has to be a sense of agreement. Until recently, I heard a prophet said that, well, the truth is the voice of God is bigger than the voice of your spouse. So if God is giving you an instruction, you're supposed to run with that. And I never thought about it that way. I think I've always sort of thought, over prioritized my agreements, as a wife, or my husband's agreements with following what God has sent. And the reality is that God's voice is actually bigger than that, which is not, it doesn't feel nice to say. It doesn't it doesn't feel like we always want to be in agreement all the time, or we always want to be, we always want our spouses to support our dreams and support us. But sometimes for the good of, or the betterment of us as a couple, or in the longer run, I think it would have been nicer, it would have been better for them to have listened to God's voice, or Abraham had sort of stood his ground a little bit to say, well, no, but hey, it's his wife. I know myself. If I want to get something from my husband, I know what to say, I know what to do. So again, I can't judge Abraham. I really want to judge him, I really want to blame him, but I really just can't in this situation. And I guess, yeah, the last part, it kind of, back to there's so many points that this makes me want to think about. The last part, it sort of made me think about, in terms of the infertility that these people face, is that, the concept of, when is the relationship ever just enough? Like, are we ever happy with enjoying our relationship with our spouses without, if you don't have children, if you don't have the dream job, if you don't have, the dream career, if you don't live, if you don't better yourself, if you have bad health, like, is the relationship ever just enough? Are we ever just happy and content? Like, and I think that's my advice, I guess, to people that are trying to get married as well, is, if you've built this dream life for yourself and your spouse, or the person that you intend to marry, like, you want to have all these children, you want to do all these things, da 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 da. If that doesn't happen, will you be okay? Can you still love this person if they get sick? Can you love them if because that's life. Life can life your marriage at any time. Is there still substance? Do you love this person enough that you cannot have these things and be satisfied as a human being? And I think it's a question that we need to ask ourselves, that is the relationship, like, could Sarah and Abraham, outside of God promising them, could they have been satisfied in their relationship as a couple, and the love that they had? Could they have been satisfied in that? And I don't think they really allowed themselves a chance to just be happy and to bask in that. Yeah, I hope that this episode has sort of opened your eyes to, I guess, the trying seasons in their relationship. And yeah, it's a bit of a it's a bit of a big one, but it was interesting to me, just uncovering their love story. And in the end, yeah, Abraham decides to be buried where Sarah was buried, and I just found that such a beautiful end to their story. And his loyalty, one thing that I'm surprised again by, is his loyalty to Sarah, because each time the wahala comes, even for a man to say, yeah, okay, if you don't want her around, then we'll get rid of her. Like, Abraham so loved her, like, he really, really loved her, and he respected her, and he listened to her, even when it was about giving up his own son. Like, severing that tie with his own son is really, really, really painful. And that speaks to, I guess, the love and the submission and the respect that Sarah had, that he did not want to be a cause of pain for her. And I think that that's really beautiful. So yeah, I like Abraham more now. But also, I guess, for couples, knowing that there are seasons that, you know, you're both left, right, and center hurting each other, sometimes in a relationship, and I think at the base of it, submission and love, again, I don't know, submission and love just keeps coming back to me, like submitting to what that person wants, for the greater good, and balancing that with submitting with God's voice. If and I can judge you, it's easier said than done, choosing to follow what God has said when you're with a spouse that you're with every day. I can imagine that wasn't easy. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Next week we're gonna talk about something a bit nicer. We're gonna talk about dating. Let's leave Abraham and Sarah alone with that. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys love this video. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you next week on the next episode. Bye bye.